The war between Russia and Ukraine has dominated global headlines for years, but could peace finally be on the horizon? With new talks taking place in Saudi Arabia, world leaders are once again attempting to broker an end to this devastating conflict. But what's at stake, and can these negotiations succeed where so many others have failed? Let's dive in. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the war has led to tens of thousands of deaths, millions displaced, and an economic crisis with ripple effects worldwide. Previous peace talks have collapsed, but now a new effort is underway, this time in Saudi Arabia. The Saudi government has positioned itself as a mediator, bringing together key global players, including representatives from Ukraine, Russia, the United States, China, and the European Union. But what's different this time? Unlike previous talks, there's now growing pressure from all sides to reach an agreement. Russia is facing heavy sanctions and battlefield setbacks, while Ukraine remains reliant on Western aid, which is beginning to face political resistance. Meanwhile, global markets are feeling the strain of prolonged instability. The key topics on the table include a potential ceasefire agreement, security guarantees for Ukraine, the status of Russian-occupied territories, and economic and humanitarian aid. However, peace is never simple. Ukraine demands full territorial integrity, including Crimea, while Russia insists on maintaining control over key regions. The US and NATO are watching closely, but China's role as a potential influencer in these talks is also raising eyebrows. Then there's the people, those caught in the middle. Ukrainians demand justice for war crimes, while many Russians are weary of prolonged conflict. The question remains, will their voices be heard at the negotiation table? Beyond the geopolitical stage, these talks carry significant consequences for the global economy. The war has severely disrupted supply chains, particularly in the energy and agriculture sectors. Ukraine, often referred to as the breadbasket of Europe, has seen its grain exports crippled, affecting food security in many parts of the world. A resolution could not only stabilize regional economies, but also provide relief for developing nations dependent on Ukrainian and Russian exports. Additionally, military alliances are at a critical juncture. If the talks fail, NATO could intensify military support for Ukraine, further escalating tensions with Russia. On the other hand, a peace agreement might reshape alliances, potentially leading to shifts in military strategies across Europe and Asia. The long-term implications of these negotiations will extend far beyond Russia and Ukraine, influencing global diplomacy for years to come. Public opinion on both sides of the conflict remains deeply divided. While some Ukrainians are open to diplomatic solutions, others see any compromise as a betrayal of their sovereignty. In Russia, state-controlled media continues to shape narratives, making it difficult to gauge the true sentiment of the population. Meanwhile, protests and demonstrations in Western countries indicate growing frustration over prolonged military aid and economic hardships linked to the war. Another key element in these discussions is the humanitarian crisis. Millions of Ukrainian refugees have sought asylum in neighboring European countries, placing strain on housing, healthcare, and social services. Reintegrating displaced populations and rebuilding war-torn cities will be an immense challenge, requiring significant international aid and cooperation. Furthermore, war crime investigations and calls for justice add complexity to peace efforts, as accountability remains a crucial demand for many Ukrainians. The digital battlefield is another aspect shaping the course of negotiations. Cyber warfare and disinformation campaigns have played a critical role in this conflict, influencing public perception and governmental decisions. Both Russia and Ukraine, along with their allies, have engaged in cyber tactics to gain the upper hand, making digital security and the prevention of foreign interference key discussion points in these talks. As these discussions unfold, questions remain about the role of non-state actors, including private military companies and influential business figures. Their vested interests in the conflict and potential economic motivations could sway diplomatic outcomes, adding yet another layer of complexity to an already fragile situation. Another pressing issue in these peace talks is the future of post-war reconstruction. Even if a ceasefire is reached, rebuilding Ukraine's infrastructure, economy, and governance systems will be a monumental task. Entire cities have been reduced to rubble, and industries have collapsed under the weight of war. The cost of rebuilding Ukraine is estimated to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars, requiring extensive foreign investment and long-term commitments from international institutions such as the United Nations and the World Bank. Moreover, the political landscape in both Russia and Ukraine could shift dramatically depending on the outcome of these talks. A peace agreement might strengthen or weaken the current leadership in both countries. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has maintained strong domestic and international support, but any compromise on territorial integrity could put his leadership at risk. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin faces internal pressures from hardliners who oppose any form of concession. The future of both nations could depend on how these negotiations unfold. Finally, the role of technology in warfare and diplomacy is becoming increasingly significant. Drone warfare, artificial intelligence, and satellite surveillance have played critical roles in the battlefield, shaping strategies and outcomes. These emerging technologies will likely influence the next phase of global security, with lessons from the Russia-Ukraine war affecting how future conflicts are managed and prevented. So, is this the beginning of the end of the war, or just another round of failed diplomacy? The world is watching. What do you think? Will these peace talks lead to a real breakthrough? Let us know in the comments below. Stay tuned to World Tomorrow for the latest updates on global politics, technology, and the future of our world. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Cutting military aid to Ukraine. If Trump stopped US and NATO support, Ukraine might be forced to negotiate. But would that be a true peace deal or just a surrender? Making a deal with Putin, could Trump convince Putin to pull back his troops? If so, what would he have to give in return? Would he lift sanctions? Would he promise not to expand NATO? Each of these scenarios has risks. If Trump forces a rushed peace, it could backfire, leading to future conflicts, just like the Treaty of Versailles after WWI, which led to Wabifei. The harsh reality: war is bigger than any one man. Trump, like many leaders before him, believes in the power of the individual. He sees himself as a deal maker, someone who can outmaneuver political opponents and strike agreements no one else can. But history has proven that no single leader has ever fully stopped war. The world is not just a boardroom where deals are signed. It is a complex system of nations, ideologies, economies, and militaries, all moving in different directions. Even if Trump could force a peace deal today, it might not last. Just like past treaties and negotiations, conflicts can reignite when deep-rooted issues remain unresolved. Peace is not about one man making a decision. It is about global cooperation, diplomacy, and addressing the underlying causes of conflict. So the real question isn't just, can Trump stop war? It's, can humanity ever truly eliminate war? Final thoughts. What do you think? Can any single leader truly stop wars, or is conflict simply a part of human nature? Was Trump actually a peacemaker, or did he simply postpone conflicts for the next administration? What would really end wars? Stronger leadership, economic stability, or global cooperation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to World Tomorrow for more insights into the future of global politics. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Economic pressure. Trump strongly believes in using economic leverage to influence adversaries. His administration imposed harsh sanctions on Iran, China, and Russia, arguing that financial pressure would force countries to negotiate. America First military strategy. While Trump did not start any new wars, he did increase military spending and pushed US allies to contribute more to their own defense, particularly NATO members, which he repeatedly criticized for not spending enough on their military budgets. Withdrawal from global agreements. Trump pulled the US out of several international treaties, including the Iran nuclear deal and the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) treaty with Russia. He argued these agreements were unfair, but critics warned that abandoning diplomatic deals could lead to more instability rather than peace. So, could this strategy truly stop wars? Or would it create new conflicts that might be even harder to control? The Russia-Ukraine war. Can Trump really end it in 24 hours? One of Trump's boldest claims is that the Russia-Ukraine war would have never happened under his leadership. But is that really true? It's important to remember that Trump did have a complex history with Ukraine and Russia during his presidency. While he provided Ukraine with military aid, he was also accused of pressuring Zelensky to investigate his political rivals, leading to his first impeachment. Would Putin have invaded Ukraine if Trump had won re-election? Some experts believe that Trump's friendly approach to Russia may have encouraged Putin to act more aggressively, knowing the US response might have been different. Others argue that Trump's unpredictability may have deterred Putin, fearing a harsher reaction. If Trump were to return to office, what would his 24-hour solution look like? Many analysts believe he would likely pressure Ukraine into a negotiated settlement, potentially forcing them to cede land to Russia in exchange for peace. But would Zelensky agree to such terms? And would European allies accept a deal that benefits Russia? Tensions with China. Can Trump stop a US-China war? One of the biggest global threats today is rising tensions between the US and China, especially over Taiwan. China has dramatically expanded its military presence in the South China Sea and has openly stated its goal of reunifying Taiwan with the mainland, by force if necessary. Under Trump's leadership, relations between the US and China worsened significantly. His administration launched a trade war, imposed sanctions, and strengthened ties with Taiwan. Would this hardline approach stop a war, or would it push China into a more aggressive stance? Some believe Trump's economic warfare strategy, placing heavy tariffs on China and cutting economic ties, would be the best way to prevent a war without using military force. Others argue that escalating economic conflict could increase tensions and make military confrontation more likely. Would China really back down due to economic pressure? Or would they simply accelerate their military build-up to challenge US dominance? The Middle East. Can Trump prevent another major war? The Middle East remains one of the most volatile regions in the world. From ongoing conflicts in Syria and Yemen to escalating tensions between Israel and Iran, war is always a looming possibility. Trump frequently boasts that under his leadership, Iran was weak and unable to fund terrorist organizations. His administration pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal and imposed crippling sanctions, arguing that economic pressure would stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. But did it work? While Iran's economy suffered, it did not stop the country from pursuing its nuclear program. In fact, since the US withdrawal, Iran has accelerated its uranium enrichment, moving closer to developing nuclear weapons than ever before. Could Trump return to the negotiating table and secure a better deal than before? Or would his hardline stance make diplomacy impossible, pushing the region closer to conflict? The real question: can one man truly stop wars? At the end of the day, stopping war is not just about one leader. Wars are driven by deep-rooted historical, political, and economic factors that no single president, no matter how powerful, can simply negotiate away. Yes, Trump's foreign policy approach has been unique, a mix of aggression, diplomacy, and economic pressure. But would it truly stop wars, or would it simply shift conflicts in a different direction? If diplomacy were that simple, would global conflicts still exist today? Would leaders like Putin, Xi Jinping, and Iran's Ayatollah really be swayed by Trump's deal-making skills? Or would they see his unpredictability as an opportunity to push their own agendas? War has shaped the course of human civilization. From ancient empires to modern superpowers, nations have fought over territory, resources, ideologies, and power. Even today, despite global institutions and diplomacy, war remains a persistent and deadly reality. Now, former US President Donald Trump claims he can change that. He insists that if he were in office, he could have prevented the war in Ukraine, could have stopped China's aggression, and could bring peace to some of the most volatile regions in the world. But can he really do it? Would his unique leadership style help prevent global conflicts? Or is this just another bold political promise that is easier said than done? Today, we break it all down: Trump's past decisions, his geopolitical strategy, and whether his approach could truly stop wars from breaking out. Make sure to watch till the end, because this discussion could reshape how we see global security and leadership. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe to World Tomorrow for more deep dives into the future of world affairs, Trump's vision, ending wars through leadership. Donald Trump has repeatedly claimed that under his leadership, wars would not happen. He has particularly focused on the Russia-Ukraine war, boldly stating that he could end it in 24 hours if given the chance. He has suggested that his personal relationships with Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky would allow him to broker a deal that no one else could. But does personal diplomacy really work when dealing with war-hardened leaders who have strategic national interests at play? Let's break down his foreign policy approach, strongman diplomacy. Trump has positioned himself as a leader who can negotiate with anyone, including the toughest world leaders. He met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, marking the first time a sitting US president had ever done so. Despite these efforts, North Korea continued developing its nuclear program and remains a major security threat. In a stunning and unexpected announcement, former President Donald Trump has proposed a historic trilateral agreement with Russia and China, aiming to cut defense spending by a staggering 50%. If implemented, this would mark one of the most significant shifts in global military strategy in modern history. But is this a genuine attempt at peace, a strategic economic move, or just another bold political statement? Today, we break down what this means for the future of global security, economic stability, and international power dynamics. Trump argues that the United States, Russia, and China are pouring excessive resources into nuclear weapons. Resources that, in his view, could be better used for economic development, infrastructure, and innovation. He has long criticized the vast sums spent on military buildup, and with this proposal, he hopes to redirect those funds toward more productive areas. But while the idea of reducing defense spending may sound appealing, the feasibility of such an agreement is another story. Trump has made it clear that any discussions will only begin once ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine are addressed. However, even if those conflicts are settled, would Russia and China genuinely be open to such a dramatic shift in military policy? Currently, the United States spends over $800 billion annually on defense, far surpassing any other country in the world. China, while still behind the US in overall military spending, has significantly ramped up its nuclear arsenal in recent years. Meanwhile, Russia, despite economic sanctions and a costly war in Ukraine, continues to invest heavily in its military capabilities. A 50% reduction in spending across all three nations would be unprecedented, fundamentally reshaping the balance of global power. But would this truly enhance security, or would it create new vulnerabilities? Supporters of Trump's proposal argue that such a deal could significantly reduce global tensions, preventing unnecessary military escalation and fostering a new era of diplomacy. If successful, this would free up hundreds of billions of dollars that could be redirected toward domestic infrastructure, healthcare, education, and technological advancements. Proponents also believe that reducing military budgets could decrease the risk of nuclear conflict, as nations would no longer feel the need to outspend and outmatch one another. However, skeptics warn that this plan may be far too ambitious and difficult to enforce. One of the biggest challenges would be ensuring compliance. How would the United States, Russia, and China verify that each country is genuinely cutting its defense budget by half? Would there be international monitoring? Would secret military projects continue in the shadows? And more importantly, could this leave some nations vulnerable to security threats from smaller, unpredictable adversaries? Trump's announcement has also sparked significant debate among US allies. European nations have expressed concern that such a drastic reduction in military spending could weaken NATO and embolden adversaries. If the US were to cut its defense budget in half, would countries like China and Russia truly do the same? Or would they continue to expand their military capabilities in secret, knowing that America was scaling back its strength? These are questions that world leaders will undoubtedly be asking in the coming months. Adding another layer of complexity is China's rapid expansion in nuclear capabilities. In recent years, China has been significantly increasing its number of nuclear warheads, with some estimates suggesting that it could match the US and Russia in nuclear strength within the next 5 to 6 years. Trump himself has previously warned about this development, so why is he now proposing negotiations that could potentially limit US military superiority? Some analysts believe this is part of a broader strategic shift, one that prioritizes economic dominance over military dominance. Others suggest this could be an attempt to force China and Russia to the negotiating table under US terms, rather than allowing them to continue unchecked military expansion. Trump has always championed the idea of peace through strength, making this proposal an interesting departure from his usual rhetoric. Is this a sign that he is shifting his approach to global diplomacy? Or is this merely a strategic talking point to gain political leverage ahead of upcoming elections? Some experts speculate that this could be a calculated move to appeal to both conservative voters who prioritize economic stability and anti-war voters who support reducing US military engagement overseas. Regardless of political perspectives, one thing is certain. If this proposal gains traction, it will have massive implications for the future of international relations. For decades, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been one of the most explosive and long-lasting disputes in modern history. The world has watched as wars, uprisings, and peace talks have come and gone, yet the cycle of violence continues. But now, former US President Donald Trump claims that if he were in office, the devastating war in Gaza would have never happened. Would his foreign policy have prevented this war? Could he actually bring peace to one of the most volatile regions in the world? Or is this just another political promise that ignores the deeper realities of the conflict? In today's deep dive, we'll explore Trump's Middle East policies, his impact on Israel and Gaza, and whether he could really have stopped the war. Stay tuned until the end for a shocking look at what the future could hold. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe to World Tomorrow for more in-depth analysis of global events. Trump's Middle East strategy, peace or power play? Donald Trump had a very different approach to the Middle East compared to his predecessors. Instead of focusing on traditional diplomacy, he used a mix of economic deals, military power, and strong alliances to shape the region. His main achievements in the Middle East were the Abraham Accords, 2020. Trump brokered historic peace deals between Israel and several Arab nations, including the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. Withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, 2018, he argued that the deal was too weak and instead imposed crippling sanctions on Iran. Moving the US Embassy to Jerusalem, 2018, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital was a major shift in US policy, heavily supported by Israel but condemned by Palestinians. Cutting aid to Palestinians, Trump stopped US funding to the United Nations agency that helps Palestinian refugees, arguing that the aid was being misused. Recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, another major pro-Israel move, which further angered Palestinian groups and their allies. But while these policies strengthened Israel, they also deepened tensions with the Palestinians, Iran, and militant groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. Did Trump's hardline stance make the region more stable, or did it plant the seeds for future conflict? Did Trump's policies push Gaza closer to war? Many Trump supporters argue that his strong pro-Israel policies made the region safer. They believe that, by cutting off funding to Palestinian leadership, he weakened terrorist groups like Hamas. By supporting Israel's military, he deterred attacks and kept the region stable. By pressuring Arab nations to make peace with Israel, he isolated Palestinian militant groups. But critics argue the opposite, that Trump's policies actually increased the chances of war by ignoring Palestinian grievances. Moving the US Embassy to Jerusalem and cutting aid were seen as direct provocations against Palestinians.